you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your...
Hello, everyone. This is Ray Renati, and you've reached Green Room on Air. Yay! This is my podcast. It's not anyone else's. It's mine. How you doing today? You surviving these crazy times? I'm having a hard time lately. At first, it wasn't bothering me, but now I'm getting the heebie-jeebies. I'm sitting here at home too much. I want to go out. I want to do things. I want to go to plays, movies, socialize, work. Can't do any of it. I hope they come up with a vaccine soon. I've been watching the news. It seems as though there are a number in the works and that they're fast-tracking all of them. So perhaps one will be viable somewhere in the near future. Let's just hope. Otherwise, we're just going to have to keep our minds as positive as we can. Eat right, exercise, and take your Geritol every morning. Anyway, today I have a special guest. Gary Stanford is his name. I've known Gary for probably, 18 years, I think. Gary and I have done one show together, Ragtime, at Foothill College 16 years ago. We talk about that in our chat, and Gary has played the role of Coalhouse Walker in the most recent production of Ragtime that he's been in at the Throckmorton Theater in Marin. Coalhouse is one of the best roles in all of musical theater, in my opinion. So yay, Gary. And he's been in the show 7 times. But mostly what we talk about in our chat is Bay Area theater and racism and the current environment that we find ourselves in now with racism and being the focus and Black Lives Matter and other things of that sort. Now, Gary is the host of a brand new podcast, videocast, and it's called Planet Bay Area, and it's part of, I think it's a new organization called California Urban Radio, and they do everything exclusively, I believe, through Facebook. And I will have the links for their videocast / podcast here in the notes. I think the 6th episode is coming up. It's extremely interesting. I loved it. I watched one of the most recent episodes. It was a couple hours long, and he had 2 gentlemen as guests, and they talked about so many interesting things that have to do with Bay Area theater, national theater, and Black Lives Matter, and other things. Now, about my conversation with Gary, I haven't edited it much at all. Actually, none, except I just cut off some of the front of our conversation that you would have found very boring. And as I listen to it, I cringe at some of the things that I say, especially when it involves racism, black and white relations, and things of that sort. I left them in on purpose for a couple of reasons. One, I want everyone to realize no matter how much you think you're sophisticated regarding race and race relations and how to discuss those topics, if you're white like me, there's a good chance that you may be very lame at it. And I think you'll hear that I am very lame. I listened to myself and I cringed. Thankfully, Gary is a very gracious, understanding, and patient person. Some of the things I say in this podcast just had me want to... I wanted to like hide under the table in my desk here. I can't believe the way I express myself around these issues. And I think I'm being fair-minded and clear-headed and non-judgmental. And actually, I'm not. when I hear myself talk, I'm not. And that was a big wake-up call for me. Anyway, maybe you'll catch those moments, and maybe you won't. But for me, it was like, yikes, what in the hell? I think we're all just so ignorant about these things. We don't talk about them until recently. We have never talked about them until recently. When I was a kid, during the 60s, there was some discussion about these issues. But in my lifetime, I can't remember everything being so on the table, open, honest, and raw. And most white people have never really had to do a lot of thinking about this, and so they really don't know how to talk about it, and that includes me. But I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm very open-minded, at least I think I am, as far as learning and trying to understand the plight of Black and brown people in our country. And I did my best, let's just say. I did my best. Anyway, we're going to get to that in a moment. First, I'd like to say, if you ever want to be a guest on the show and you're a theater artist or an artist of any kind, just go to my website, greenroomonair, and there's a link on there saying you would like to be a guest on the show, and it'll send me an email and we can talk. Or send me an email directly at greenroomonair@gmail.com. Also, if you would be so kind, I would love it. It would be so helpful to me if you went into Apple Podcasts through iTunes and left me a rating and or a review of this podcast. That would be wonderful. Let me read you one of the reviews I've had recently. This is from somebody named Parafan number 1. Love listening to the podcast. Ray has a wide array of guests in the industry, and hearing his questions to the guests, coupled with his experience in the industry, makes for a knowledgeable listen. A must for anyone who works in the industry or is interested in it. Wow. Gosh, I feel special. So help make me feel special, please. And go leave me some stars, lots of stars, and a review, and I'll read it online. I'll reread it live on the next podcast, and I'll even say your name if you want. Send me an email and let me know you left it, and you too can have your 15 seconds of fame on Green Room on Air. All righty. Well, without any further ado, let's get to my discussion with Gary Stanford Jr. First of all, I want to say it's so great to see you. I mean, it's been like years.
Yeah, good to see you. Man, it has been years.
I don't think we ever really got to talk a lot.
Right.
We did some shows together.
Couple shows. Yeah.
Let's see. What was it? Ragtime?
Yes, we did get a ragtime in.
That's been 16 years.
Oh my gosh.
At Foothill, right?
Yes.
I just had yeah.
I ended up doing ragtime the 7th time last year.
Wow.
So I've ended up kind of just doing the Bay Area tour of ragtime.
That's great. Did I hear that you got to play Coal House recently?
I did, yes. Finally, I got to play Coal House up at Throckmorton Theater in Mill Valley.
Oh, great! Yeah, I've never been to anything.
Have you ever worked at Throckmorton?
I haven't, but I know they do some great stuff, and they have a lot of stand-up comedy and all kinds of.
Yes, cool, different, yeah, solo performers, and it's a really cool space. If you ever get to check it out, it's one of the original theaters that Charlie Chaplin performed in. So it had like a silent film segment part of it, and one of those like fireproof rooms to play the Nitro film. So it goes way back.
Wow.
Yeah.
He This was his sort of his headquarters out here, right at the beginning at Fremont and Marin and
That's
East
right.
Bay. Yeah,
Fremont Marin. Yeah.
I think Palo
Yeah.
Alto. Even I think he, if I remember right,
Yeah,
I
what
think
was
he
one in
shot
Palo Alto? Yeah.
yeah, amazing. So, let's talk about your really cool. I don't know what you're calling it. A TV show, podcast.
It's a radio. I guess it's a radio podcast at the moment.
Yeah.
And it really just out of the George Floyd, situation. A lot of things have happened in my life, particularly, with all these theater companies that I had been working with, kind of reaching out and wanting to create new, programs and opportunities and really talk about racism, talk about the situations with diversity and inclusion in the arts. And then out of those discussions, a friend of a friend said he just started stalking my Facebook and looking at all the discussions that I was, bringing up and realize, hey, this guy, he explains himself really well. He's a good communicator. He has a performing arts background. So would I be interested in doing this radio show? And I had not given it a single thought previous to that. I had no, inkling or interest in doing radio work, but I was like, hey, maybe it's a good time to give it a shot. And I started doing some of my own research and putting together, a platform with different guests every week and all that. So, and here we are, episode 5 coming up.
It's so interesting. I loved watching the last episode. I'm still not through the whole thing, but it's extremely educational.
Yeah. That's what I try to do. Yeah.
I really enjoyed listening to the history of San Francisco and the Bay Area and how Black people were affected by different things. And we never learn any of this stuff in school, of course. It's all suppressed or swept under the carpet.
It's the problem. Yeah.
What was the Red Summer? Can you just talk about that a little bit? Because I bet almost nobody listening to this has heard of it.
Absolutely. So what's fascinating about the Red Summer is how lost it is in our history books, first of all. And really, it's a culmination of a few things. It's really about the fact that the Reconstruction era, which incorporated Jim Crow, separate but equal, kind of facilitated Black neighborhoods being able to flourish a little bit, kind of in their own domain. And because so many of the former slaves were skilled workers, skilled craftsmen, skilled farmers, skilled, anything, cooks, horse wranglers, they all had skills coming out of the South. Mm-hmm. So they were able to really, start their own businesses and really have some pretty good levels of financial ownership. And then kind of going into the early 1900s, there was another pandemic. There was the Spanish flu that hit the United States twice, I guess. No. And 1918 was the second version of the Spanish flu, which really wiped out a lot of big communities, and Black folks from the South really started migrating up to northern cities just to get away from, the devastating effects of that flu. So the culmination of, individual Black towns all over the country and an influx of Black people coming up from the South culminated in race wars. And the white supremacy in the country kind of got to this point where they felt that Black people were too successful were not the, the black people who had formerly worked for white, owned businesses, kind of left those businesses and went back into their own town. So they were very self-sufficient. And then when you look at a couple cities like St. Louis and Tulsa, Oklahoma, they had built their own financial system. So that's where you get the Black Wall Street. And they were very, very successful, had their own banks, had their own financial, had their own Wall Street system. So, so that culmination of Black people kind of rising up in their own domain, one thing led to another, and the Red Summer, which initially started in 1917, and it's actually well documented in the New York Times that year. Mm-hmm. I think there were 30 cities that were under attack, that were having race wars, having white mobs flood these Black towns and basically burn them out of their towns, shooting, hanging, killing, running them out of town. It got to a point where it was pretty much like a national disaster, a national emergency. And the president basically took the World War I returning troops after the Treaty of Versailles happened, end of World War I. All of those troops were sent back home to try to squelch all of these riots, all of these race wars in the country. So you'll see a lot of National Geographic pictures of World War I troops, escorting Black people in and out of towns and just kind of in martial law, basically.
Yeah.
So, so that happened from the bulk of it, you'll see other incidents like with Central Park in New York in like 1850 something, I think it might be 1853 or 8, something like that, where there were other small incidents of Black cities, Black communities being uprooted from where they were. But the bulk of this violence was 1917 to 1923. And it affected upwards of like 53 different cities all over the country.
Gosh.
So that to me was kind of the worst period of American history in terms of Black people, because we kind of had built this financial independence, this, success factor in the country. And that really just got torn away in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Post-slavery, I guess that's the worst thing.
Post-slavery, exactly.
I think slavery for 300 or 400 years is probably the most horrible thing.
What's really interesting is during, obviously slavery was horrific, but the one thing about slavery is Black people were commodities, even though we weren't considered fully human beings.
3/5.
We were enough commodities that we weren't killed off. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
God, it just blows my mind, honestly. Now, ironically, because of segregation, Black people were able to thrive in this system.
Yes.
Although I think that getting rid of segregation was absolutely necessary to whatever extent we've done it since whenever that happened in the 60s, I guess.
Right.
But, I find it very ironic that, or maybe it's just shows the amazing fortitude of human nature that even though you're being suppressed and repressed and put down, you find a way to create your own economy, to create your own world, as it were.
Right.
But the status quo, the white status quo, just could not tolerate that. I saw it as a threat, I suppose.
Yeah.
But now, am I right, though, that some of it was built back up after that? Like, didn't Las Vegas have its own strip that was mostly for Black people? Or I guess anyone could go, but
absolutely.
It was... Yeah.
So once again, the Red Summer happened, and a lot of Black communities were pushed out of small towns and went into the major cities. So then there's another big influx of Black people going to Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, all these major cities and building big communities there.
Yeah.
And even integrating with white communities and other, like my mom grew up in Philadelphia where there were Jews and Italians and Polish, and all the immigrants were all within the Black communities. They're all integrated.
Yes. And that happened in San Francisco too, to some extent, I think.
Exactly. It did. Yeah.
When I was listening to your show with those two gentlemen, Gary and Gary, no, not Gary. That's you. Jeffrey Moon and Rory. Rory, yeah. They were talking about, and maybe you can help me with this because I didn't get the whole thing, but how Irish people, and I know Italian people too, came over here and they were sort of at the bottom of the social barrel, as it were. And that's my heritage, Italian mostly. But that for some reason, they became very prejudiced as a people against blacks and other minorities. And I've always wondered why. And I think that he said it was because, and I totally think this is true, because it was a competition to not being on the bottom or something. Yeah. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I mean, I've experienced that in my own family, and I always wondered. I hate to say that, but it's true. I've always wondered where that came from because it never made any sense to me.
It's really, really interesting how systematic that whole transition was. And I don't think anyone really knew what was happening beneath the surface. And when you look at, a few things that I talked about on that very episode, just with the 1936 New York World Fair, they had the new ride Futurama, which kind of had this, model. You ride through this model utopian city, futuristic city. All white people.
Fence.
We didn't know that was happening. Oh, this
Wonder Bread.
Building this perfect white community, right?
Yeah.
So through things like that, and then the building of all the interstate highways, where sadly white supremacists took hold of the engineering side of it and ended up plowing through all the black neighborhoods that were in the major cities. So once again, displacing them is separate. That's why we have a black neighborhood and a white neighborhood and an Asian neighborhood and a Japanese neighborhood. Like all of those were zoned out as the cities were redeveloped or enhanced, right? So those were engineered, like the separation of the re-segregation of neighborhoods and cities was very tightly engineered. So where does that leave Italians and Polish and Germans and, whatever? They end up in the white neighborhood, So that is part of the separation. And then you connect like education, you connect banking systems that are giving loans to buying houses, to renting homes, to owning property. And you're zoning people into specific neighborhoods through those systematic, right?
Yes.
These systematic processes. So all of a sudden, Italians, we used to have to fight for whatever we wanted. And all of a sudden they're getting access to the white neighborhood, everything that is involved in the white neighborhood. And they're able to jump into local governments and have a voice and make decisions and new policies and all of that.
And I think they want to make sure they stayed there. So it's like,
and they stay there.
It's like, I better join the prejudice bandwagon so that I look and act like everybody else who hates those they're afraid of.
Exactly.
Yeah. My when we first got our dog, she's kind of a passive dog. So she would placate all of us except my little son. It was only a little boy, right? And she would try to dominate him because he was the only one she could dominate. I hate to say that, but it's kind of like
it's very similar. It's a good social experiment.
Yeah, and if you're unconscious, you're going to take part in it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. It even happened within the black neighborhoods and cities. We had we got to a point where lighter skinned Black people looked down on darker skinned Black people within the Black community, you know?
There's a wonderful two-person play about that called Yellow Man, I think. I've
heard of that play. I've never seen it.
Oh, I saw it at Berkeley Rep like 10 years ago. It's so good.
Okay.
It's so good. I don't know if it would be the right time to do it now. Probably not. But at some point, it would be cool if somebody put that up. I don't think it would be right under these circumstances because that's not what people are focusing on. But yeah, it's good.
People need to understand how that works, though.
Yeah,
I think it's really important. Like people don't really understand how we got to this point. You know, they don't understand that sadly white neighborhoods are grooming people to be white supremacists. You know, so you can decide to go with the flow and accept your privilege and hold on tightly to your privilege, or you could have an open mind and be a critical thinker and say, hey, something's wrong with this.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to look down on those people and judge them versus me, you know, so you make your own decision.
I have a question about the term white supremacist. And let me explain it a little bit. I don't want to get too in depth.
Yeah.
I was reading that living document that's being circulated, and right on the new webpage, it says something about white supremacy or something.
Right.
And my first thing is, I'm not a white supremacist. That's Timothy McVeigh. That's the KKK, blah, blah.
Oh, extremist. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I Googled white supremacist and, there's white supremacy, which is like just a term meaning, which is what we live under. Right.
Yes.
There's systemic white, or if you want to say systematic and systemic white privilege that pervades our society for the most part. And but then there's the term white supremacist.
Yes.
Which when a white person hears that anyway, they're going to go, I ain't no white supremacist.
I'm very defensive about it. Yeah.
Because I mean, it evokes these images of people that you
go around lynching people and beating up Black people and right.
And at first I was like, why are they writing this? Whoever wrote this thing, why are they using that term? I mean,
yeah.
But then I was thinking, I even wrote a note to the who said contact us saying, why, I totally am behind what you're doing here. I think it's great. But when you use the word white supremacy, you might all of a sudden lose half your audience because they're going to be.
Oh, right.
But on the other hand, it is provocative, which maybe in the long term is a good thing, right? Because I was thinking part of it subconsciously, even with me, was like, as a white person, I can say whatever the hell I want. I'm probably going to be fine, right?
Right.
As a Black person, and I was listening to a podcast about something in the South where Black people were trying to get their rights in the 80s, and they were in court, and the white people were calling everyone names, F you, blah, blah, blah. And the Black people came in and were very polite and made sure that they were very professional. They were all dressed up like in their Sunday best and all. And I was thinking, just because they used one term, whoever wrote this website, I'm taking offense at it, which I really wasn't. I just had this gut reaction.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking
it's almost like the N word for a Black person,
Almost. But on the other hand, so what?
Because it's stereotype.
I still see videos of white people using the N word, on Reddit. Black people. So it's like, hey, what's wrong if they do it once in a while?
Right.
It's like, I can handle it. I should be able to handle it. They've had to handle it for hundreds of years.
Yes, right.
So I kind of liked it after a while. I was like, this isn't a good idea, but then I was thinking, this is a damn good idea.
Yeah,
because, it's like, screw you. We can say things, and maybe they're not perfect, but so what? You do it all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
Because as white people, we do. We feel like we can say and do anything we want. I mean, anyway, I'm going on here.
It's enabled. Yeah. It's just the societal and I talked about it in a previous episode, just me growing up in primarily white neighborhoods. Like I see it from a very unique perspective, right?
Mhm.
I lived in the neighborhood that provided the privilege, right? So I saw how it's handed off, how it's handed down from generation to generation, how the school systems work, the banking systems, all of business, corporations, like they all just enable things to continue on where white people have a privilege, right? White people get quickly promoted up the chain of command. White people always are going to get loans for homes. White people are always going to get access to the best education. That's just systematic stuff, right? So if you're living in that system, you're not living in that system because you think you're better than black people. But what's happening is the system is feeding you, this enablement so that you, after a while, you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I am better than black people. Maybe white communities are smarter and cleaner and more intelligent and less criminal oriented than black communities. Like you just naturally take on those thought patterns, right?
Yes. It's so
easy
to do.
When we talk about supremacy, like white supremacy, I think there's different levels of it. Like the extremist level is you're actually like preaching the stuff, to groups of people and you go out on the town and do crazy stuff. But then there's a very how do you say, placid or neutral or a non, aggressive versions of white supremacy where you just live through it and accept it for what it is.
Yes. Okay. So I understand. I just personally, I never thought of it that way. I always thought of the white supremacists as being over there,
Yes. And that's where our education, so many of these issues map back to education. We even learned in grade school that white supremacy is the KKK. Exactly. And they go around with hoods on and da-da-da-da-da-da.
That's my image, yeah.
That's your image, right? And then, so there's just so much missing from how we teach this stuff.
I get it now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a really, we're getting a lot of big doses of reality now.
So do you think that this is the dawn of a new age?
I think so. I do think so. I think just, from a white community perspective, I am seeing so much more perspective now on the whole situation. Like people are seeing these issues very objectively now. They're asking lots of really good questions. They're formulating lots of very well thought out, objective, ways to describe issues. Like, hey, Hamilton, Hamilton the musical. We brought that up as well as a big topic. It's a wonderful show. It's made over $1 billion. It gave, unknown black actors an opportunity to really shine, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also lots of issues with it, So it's like when we talk about issues with something, we're not canceling it out. We're not saying, oh, it's the horrible thing because you left out this, da-da-da-da. We're just saying that that's an issue that maybe we can address in the future. So we need to talk about things from a less emotional, reactive perspective.
What are the issues with Hamilton? I'm curious. I don't know.
Yeah. So, and these are things like just talking from a black perspective. Obviously, you have characters in that show that historical figures that were slave owners during that time period, and they're played by black men. So that, from a black perspective, is pretty efficient, right? Like,
I never thought of that. Okay, right? Yeah, gosh,
that's just okay. So now it's back. Now for black people, it's like, okay, now we're going back to this in a white supremacy way of thinking is to generalize everything. Oh, the Italians, they struggled just as much as black people, and da 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 da.
No, they didn't.
Like you get it right, It's always trying to minimize, right, the Black struggle. Oh, it's not as bad as you're saying. Stop complaining so much. It's not so bad, Other people struggle. So that's where it's like when you put a black face on one of the most, one of the most horrible periods of time, that's like definitely minimizing how bad it was for Black people. That's a trigger for Black people to see that.
Wow.
And then there was an article a few days ago that really gave a lot of props to the show, but it mentioned that it didn't have any mention of Native Americans that were really critical to that time period, to the revolutionary era. They had a lot to do with, the course of history, how it played out. There's no mention at all in the show about them. Could have just even been a line or two in one of the songs. That would have done it. So that is another whole thing.
Another scar on our history is what we did to the native peoples of this. Oh my God. I mean, this country started on two horrible atrocities.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Now slavery and the wiping out of a race.
Yeah.
Basically. Now I'm just curious. I have a couple of friends in Hamilton on Broadway. I know you have at least one.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a chance to talk to them about this?
I have not. I want to reach out to. We both know Ricky and James.
Yeah, and I know David too. I was in a show with David.
And David. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I've tried to
I would love to
talk to them, but ever since they both became big celebs, I used to talk to James quite a bit, but once it became, I could just imagine they just get inundated with.
Oh my gosh!
They have to
hundreds.
There's absolutely no way. I mean, you just got to keep your closest friends close and just kind of forget about everything else.
Yeah, right.
Which I totally understand, but I'd love to have him on the show, but I don't think it'll happen. Until I become big time.
There we go. There we go.
Well, maybe he'll go on yours.
Yay. All right. Yes, absolutely.
Or maybe David, or maybe Ricky will.
Maybe Ricky would. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be great.
You got to reach out to him. Yeah.
Although there are plenty of people in the Bay Area who are extremely interesting too. I'm just thinking in terms of getting you some big numbers.
Perspectives. Yeah, no, I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Let's see. I love. No, this is a little off. Well, first of all, before I get to that, I love your format. I'm watching your show on Facebook. Now, is it only video, or is there? You said there's something about radio as well. Is it on radio, or is it just a video on Facebook?
The broadcast medium that we're using now is the Facebook Live video.
Okay, and it's called now. What is it called exactly? Because I know it seems like there are two organizations that are sort of involved in it.
So my weekly show is called Planet Bay Area.
Okay.
And I dubbed it that. And then the mothership radio station is called California Urban.
Okay.
So they broadcast my show.
I see. And are you in a studio? I love the way you do this. Now, are you with the people that you're interviewing? Or are you somewhere else?
Yeah, so we're in a studio in Oakland. And we're, we're perfectly social distance from each other. And we have a HEPA filter going on in between us to kind of keep the air purified, so it's a kind of a cool setup.
Cool. Okay. So it's the social distancing. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching it and I'm like, I think they're looking at him. Okay. But it's hard to see if you were in the same room or not.
Each other. Maybe 8 feet apart or something,
And do you do the editing or somebody else doing that?
No. So Marcus Hughes, who owns California Urban, he's actually the DJ / producer.
Okay.
And he's doing the editing. He's doing the camera switches and all of the graphics and stuff. He's loaded that up into the show. So
it's cool. I love the sound effects and stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he's doing
I
all
really
that
like
stuff.
that. I love it. I
He's
love
having
it.
a great time back there.
It just
Yeah,
takes a lot of time to do all that because I have to do all my own editing here, and
got
man,
it.
it's time
Yeah,
consuming.
time
I'll tell
consuming.
you.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
god! So as many times I'm going, what am I doing this for?
Right.
And it's just because I love doing it, but the work
Right.
afterwards. But
It's a lot of
it's
work.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um. Let's see. How long have you been performing and directing in the Bay Area now? Quite a while, huh?
Wow, performing since performing in musical theater since '87. And before that, my brother and I kind of performed together, all through the '80s, doing stuff at home. My mom had a performing company, but I started doing theater with Theater Works
Okay.
in 1987. Is it Peter Pan?
Oh
And
yeah.
that was kind of the beginning of stuff with Robert Kelly and Francis Jew and all those folks down there when they were a tiny little community theater,
Yes, I remember
rehearsing
that.
out of middle school.
Yeah, I remember going
Back
to
in the
shows
day.
at like Coverly High School classrooms. Theater
That's
was
right, Coverly. Yes, yes, the good old days.
yeah.
So yeah, that's been doing it since then, and didn't really take musical theater too seriously because once again, my family performing company was performing throughout the year. We were booking shows for ourselves.
Oh,
All
what
the
was
time.
this? What I didn't. What would you had? Your family had a company. What was that?
Yeah, so my mom had a performing arts company. My brother's still running it now. It's called PS Performance. And she would put on variety shows for primarily convalescent homes, hospitals, senior groups, Rotary Lions clubs, all kinds. She would book stuff at Filoli Mansion, all over the Bay Area. She would book stuff for the kids. And she would teach them how to sing and dance and do little acting scenes. And we do variety shows throughout the year.
Nice. And your brother's running that now. I haven't seen your brother in years.
I know.
I don't think
Yeah.
is he on Facebook? I don't think he's on Facebook. Is he?
No, he's not a social media person at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to share stuff with him. I'll send him links, but he's not on it at all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
surprised at how many people I knew from years ago just are not on Facebook.
Right.
I was like, oh, I'll just find them on Facebook. No, they're not there. Oh well.
Out there.
Yeah. So as far as your performing goes, and there, I've watched people who are actors and directors and things who listen to this. What if there's one thing you had wish you had known before you started taking theater seriously? What was that you didn't know that you do know?
Oh, that's a good question. I think as I got more serious about musical theater and working on my voice, this was maybe right around when we did Ragtime.
Mm-hmm.
I had started to really work on my voice, and I had actually auditioned for Coal House for that production, but there was James. So
I think it was kind of predetermined.
it's kind of predetermined, but they actually allowed me to audition
Cool.
against him. So I was
Right
like, I
on.
learned a lot just from like, oh wow, he is James Aguilar for a reason. But that motivated me actually to continue really working on my voice and build up my acting and performing skills for theater.
Yeah.
I guess I've learned over the years that you can have an impact on a show many different ways. As I've ventured into doing stuff behind the scenes, I've learned a lot more about designing shows, directing a number of shows, choreographing a number of shows. Learned a lot about color blind casting, color conscious casting, all the different opportunities around the Bay Area. I've started to venture out further and further, work with different companies. So I've just learned a lot more about the theater industry over the years.
So color conscious casting, color blind casting, this is a very complicated issue, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a different answer for every show almost,
And there's no right answer, I don't think. It's
Well,
it's nuanced and difficult to make the right. Well, maybe there is a right answer, but it's always difficult to discover it and to make the right decision sometimes.
And I think that's the good point that you bring that up, because it's there. As I said, the answer is different for every show and every theater, every director. I think the right way of thinking is just to think in terms of, let me try to give different types of people opportunities, just at that basic level. And if you have that type of philosophy, you're going to figure out who fits where and what and this and that, who's going to match up with, different people for your leads and supporting roles and all of that,
I think there is a mistake that people make, and I've made it as a director in the past, but I've learned that you have to match people perfectly. Like, you couldn't have a white family with and a black Biff. But that's actually not true. That's actually not true.
Right.
Audiences are so when people are good and they're doing a great job, it doesn't that just completely disappears within the first 30 seconds.
Yes.
And in my experience, because I've had to struggle with it, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. I've seen all kinds of shows with people cast in interesting ways, and I never gave it a second thought while I was watching the show. In fact, I liked it.
Right.
That's why I think a lot of this prejudice and bigotry and everything is born of ignorance.
There you go. Absolutely.
Before, for instance, before I got into theater, could you hear my phone?
Yeah. I love that.
I've been into theater when I was a little kid, but when I as I got older, not before I got into theater, but as it was always called non-traditional casting. Later. And as that became prevalent, I was so confused. I didn't understand what was going on. And actually, when I think back, I had some pretty ignorant ideas myself. But that's changed over time.
Yeah, yes. We come to accept more change. The more that we're exposed to, the more we accept,
Yes. And before I started doing musicals, which was kind of late in my career, I think I had some homophobia.
Oh,
and then all of a sudden, almost all of my male friends were gay.
Yeah, right.
And then it's like, man, I love gay people. They're so much fun.
Yeah, right.
It's like,
yes.
And then last year I was in this big reading festival at Lorraine Hansberry Theater, I think.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
2 years ago, I can't remember. And I have never had so much fun doing theater in my life. Oh my gosh. I never laughed so hard.
Right.
I just think that people are closed off. They're either purposely closed off to people who look different than them or have different backgrounds, or they're either purposely or they're just by design, systemic design left out of it. And then they develop these completely wrong-headed ideas about the other.
That's right.
And it's kind of human nature, unfortunately, unless you're conscious of it.
That's what I'm talking about, being groomed. That's why our isolated neighborhoods, environments groom us to be ignorant of everybody else. Yeah. Or supreme or supremacist to everybody else, all of those things. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I tell you a little story?
That theater folks get so much access that it's definitely easier for us, Go ahead.
Yes, because we're exposed to more diversity by design, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Although not enough, apparently.
Not enough.
From what I've been reading. I didn't even notice all those things until I started reading that document, the living document.
Right.
People don't know what we're talking about. There's a document where people were allowed to tell stories about what happened to them because of their diversity in Bay Area theater. And
There's some
There's
stories.
so
out
many
there.
things that I was just blind to because I'm white. I
Right.
guess I didn't even think about it. Can I tell you a quick story? Because
Yeah, go for
because
it.
I want to get your take on this, and it's a personal thing that happened to me in terms of this. I'll try to do it quickly. I'm
Yeah,
not
go
doing
for
this
it.
to
No
tell my
worries.
story, but I want to hear
I
what you
love
think.
stories,
Okay, so
yeah.
about 9 years ago, I was going to school in London, and I took it was 4th of July, and I was pining for America. I found this play called The Mountaintop by Katori Hall. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I know
And
that show. Yeah,
it
that's right.
opened in London. It was playing in London. That's where it opened. And this was the first production. And it was 4th of July. So I took like this 2.5 hour bus ride to the outskirts of London and saw this play above this pub.
Okay.
And I was absolutely blown away. I was like, like when you go to a show and you're just like, holy shit, this is why I do this.
Right.
I'm like, I love this.
Yeah.
So I literally, after the show, I got outside, I wrote an email to Katori Hall, like when I was in the lobby. I got to help you with this play. I want to bring it to the Bay Area. I would love to direct it, but if I can't, I want to help you. I helped her get it into TheaterWorks.
Nice.
And then
nice.
I was, at the time, I was involved with the Pear Theater, and I really wanted the Pear to do it. I wanted it to direct it badly. And then I did start to direct it. And then right when I began directing it, it was right at the first wave, or whatever you call it, of Black Lives Matter, I guess like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, 2013-ish. Yeah.
Yes. And then also there was a production of, I think, an August Wilson play. I can't remember which one it was, but there was a white director directing it, and it caused all kinds of problems. And then at the same time, there was somebody in the Midwest who cast Martin Luther King as a white man playing Martin Luther King.
I remember that.
Yeah. And this was all while I was about to direct The Mountaintop. Man. And I swear to God, this is true. I never even crossed my mind that it might not be appropriate for me to direct this play. All I knew was I loved the play. Martin Luther King to me was always a symbol for everyone in my life since I was a little kid, because I kind of grew up with that whole thing.
Yes.
I never thought of it as like a black or white thing. It was like a come together thing. It was like this little kid in me. And then all of a sudden when this happened, so the first thing that happened was I had auditions, and like 46 people signed up for the auditions, and I was all excited. And then 6 people showed up.
Whoa.
And luckily they were all awesome. And I ended up with 2 amazing actors. I don't know if you got to see the show, but
I didn't get to see that one. No.
Yeah, it was incredible. So it was great. But
yeah.
I was then, but then when we started rehearsals, I was totally paranoid. Like, oh my God, I'm this white guy. With everything that was going on.
Appropriate? Is there going to be some problems? Yeah.
Yeah. And I never even considered not directing it. I couldn't. Because it had been literally a huge goal of mine for 9 years. Or at that time, 5 years. 5 years.
Okay.
So here's what I stupidly did. Okay, tell me what this sounds like. All right. I can't even believe I'm going to say this. So I'm sitting in the first rehearsal with my cast of 2 black men and a black woman. And I say, I know I look like the typical white guy, but my family this is true too. My family was sharecroppers in Pacifica. And they were.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not saying that my experience at all equates to yours, but I just want to say that that's my background. And it's like, oh, fuck. And the look I got were like, oh, God, I'm done. I've just cooked my own goose. And there's no coming back. And from then on, it was so much tension, even though they were awesome and we created a great thing. But it was so bad that I had to bring in every rehearsal, like halfway through rehearsals, I had to bring a woman in from the board to be there to kind of counterbalance this, whatever the hell happened between us because of what I said.
Yeah.
What do you think about all that? I know there's a long story. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm glad you told me that. Yes. Yes. So,
Okay.
yeah. That is like, that is a big trigger for Black people, as you've probably witnessed
I
firsthand.
had no idea it was going to be. Or I never would have done it because I caused myself hell. Okay, so tell me what.
I think what happened there was, if I was a person in your cast, I would think, okay, well, there's no way that you can obviously equate your life to a Black person's life.
And I said that. I said that, but it didn't matter.
And you said that as well. Okay. And I guess the part where, so a lot of white people have this response that I'm not racist. I know Black people. My best friend's a Black person. Like, so we've heard that a million times, right? So that's where if somebody else says, it's like, oh God, not again. Like, here we go again. I think that the approach should be, and this is a really good lesson for everyone else, when you get to a position where you are the boss, you're a boss of a Black person, or you're a partner of a Black person, or you're directing a Black show, that you really maintain this space to be very ignorant about the Black experience. Leave space so that you don't get to a point where it's like, the Black person doesn't have a voice. I think that's the real trigger, is the white person will say, I know what's best for you. Like, I'm the boss, or I'm this, I'm that, because I've studied and I know Black people, this is how it's going to be. And, I'm not enabling you as a Black person to have a lot of say about it. That's kind of the situation that normally happens. So even if you didn't mean to say, I'm Mr. Director and I'm oppressing you to listen to me and follow my direction, you probably weren't trying to say that at all.
No, in fact, it was the opposite. It was
the opposite. That's how it was perceived. As soon that's like the death knell right there, to say, Black people, you've lived it, all of that stuff. In fact, I'm actually talking to, once a month, I'm trying to talk to a very, very right-winged white man who has done theater in the South Bay. He's a Trump supporter. He is, anti-liberal to the nth degree. And so we're having really intelligent discussions about, okay, let's unpack everything from a Black perspective. Let's just, pretend, you grew up in military bases and there were Black people and white people and they all had equal, opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what you saw. That's, from a Black person's perspective, it's going to be like, no, that's not how it was. You might have seen it to be a certain way, but behind closed doors, that Black person struggled at every turn.
Yeah.
At every opportunity to raise their kids or get a new job or get promoted or be recognized. There was a struggle there that you did not experience. So that's why your experience with those actors was, they are thinking, wow, this guy has no idea how much we've struggled in our lives and how horrible it is to be a Black person in America. So what you probably got is a lot of passive aggressive.
Totally, the whole time.
Because they can't just come out and say, hey, Ray, our life sucks. You just don't want to say that. So you get a lot of passive aggressive emotions and responses and all of that.
It's so sad and made me so frustrated. Because I think, and also they didn't know me. Like, you kind of know me.
Right,
I know there's two things about me that there's a couple things, but first of all, I'm pretty chill, but I also just say shit, and it gets me in trouble a lot.
Right.
And I usually don't mean it for mean reasons. I usually just.
Yeah. No, that's another really good. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think going forward, with the community theater, situations that we read about, and how things just basically have decayed in terms of racial relations. I think I have no problem with a white person directing a black play, but the solution to that is to probably bring on a black person to be on staff, like an expert, like someone who has a black point of view to help drive the medium. Like if you have a vision of the show, you know what you want to do with the actors, you know the story that you want to tell, you need a black person next to you to kind of work out the micro aggressions, the micro details, the nuances, the backstories, like to really help drive that side of it. That keeps it a very balanced process for the black people in the show.
Yes, the microaggressions. We were microaggressioning each other for 6 weeks.
Oh gosh!
The worst one was the worst one. Oh my God, I can't believe it. The worst one was Kamei, who is the name of the character. She's a maid in this fictitious The Last Night of Martin Luther King's life. She's the maid in the hotel. And I don't want to give anything away, but in her prior life, the way I read it was she was a prostitute. And there's a monologue where she talks about that, but it's not completely explicit. Yeah. Explicit. So, but I was certain of it, and the actress was like standing up to me. Good for her.
Okay, like wait a minute. Yeah.
You know what I did? This sucks. I can't believe I did this. So I knew Katori Hall pretty well because I'd been emailing her for all those years, a little on and off. And I wrote her an email right in the middle of rehearsal. Was Kim May a prostitute? She answered me in like 5 seconds, yes. And I was like, yeah. I mean, like told the actress.
Okay.
Like, and then I was like, what the hell am I doing? And then that was like the straw that broke the camel's
level. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing implicitly wrong for any of us to be doing any of that, but under this situation, after what had already started, that was so stupid of me. And now I would never do. I mean, that was only a few years ago, but I've learned so much since then. I would never do that again. I'm not trying to talk about myself in this conversation.
No. That's just, you're bringing up really good points, because if it was a different show and the cast was white, I have no problem with anything you did or said, or because you're just following protocol. Yeah. And you're not talking to people who have been, quote unquote, oppressed.
Right.
You're not talking to people who have had a completely different life experience than you. And that's the difference. That's the main difference there. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's really tricky to think of that, where, if you were Asian and the cast members were Asian, it would be totally different than the fact that you were white and they were black.
Totally. And here, what a jerk. I mean, it's like, oh, I'm going to write a note to your black sister just because I happen to know her, and I'm going to prove you wrong.
Oh, yeah. 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 Right.
Like it didn't even matter. Like she was playing it fine. Right.
Right.
Like she was playing it fine. Right. I didn't care if she believed in retrospect. It didn't really matter if she believed she was
what the motivation was. Yeah. Yeah.
I just had to be right.
Got it. Yes. And so take that and multiply it by 1 million, and just let's put some different scenarios behind that and see why that pissed her off so much. Okay. She has a child in school, and the teachers say that her son or daughter or kid is, a horribly behaved, and, they shouldn't be part of the educational program, et cetera, et cetera. We're suspending your kid, right? So that happens at a much higher rate than white kids. And she tries to, reason with them, deal with them. They will not listen to her, right? Things like that, right? Or she goes as I said before, she goes for a house loan. She has good credit. She wants to live in a white neighborhood. No, everywhere she goes. So those things all compile on themselves. And then here I'm doing something for fun. And now I have another white person telling me no, dictating my thoughts. So that's just like, oh, it's like a nuclear explosion, right?
And what I did was so awful. I used the playwright who was also a black woman, like the same age,
Against her.
What a jerk. I mean, I didn't.
Right.
Unbelievable,
right.
like the unconscious stuff you can do.
Yeah.
Without being and becoming so insensitive. And just because you're in a position of power, I think I'm impervious to that, but I'm not. And I'm like, as the older I get, the more aware I am. But it's just
great. That's great.
It's amazing. Yeah. And I think that so many of us can't even get to that point of realization. And you can do it with anybody
really.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, good. I was just going to say that we really have to come to a self-realization of our privilege.
Yeah.
And realize how different. For example, a white man has considerably more privilege than anyone else. And I don't think people really realize, what does that mean? Like, white men are just living normal American lives. Like, we get, grow up, we get education, we go to church, we get jobs, we try to make money for our families. Like, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the difference is everyone else has much more of a struggle to get to that point. So that's where you realize, hey, okay, so now that I realize, hey, I have more privilege, what does that mean? That means that I've been given access to always have the right answer. Like, I'm the one that needs to have the right answer. I need to be right all the time. I need to be a leader. I need to be, I need to be the best. I need to be the best that I can be. All of those things are fine, but the difference is everyone else doesn't get to have those things, right? At nearly the same rate. Yeah. So that's just like, okay, I need to compromise a little bit on what I've been given.
Yes. And people are unconscious of their privilege, but you can just think of it in a simple term. Say there's a job opening and 10 people show up. And 9 of them are white and 1 of them is black. Well, if you're the black person, I am sure that okay, I'm already 5-10 steps behind everyone else.
Exactly.
Not that you should go in there acting that way, but it's kind of like an audition. Like when I go to TheaterWorks, I know I'm way behind. It's like, okay, I'm not going to act that way when I'm in the room, but I know I know there are like 5 people ahead of me automatically. But I mean, if you're black, it's going to be like that with everything.
It's going to be like that with everything. Yes,
for the most part, unless you go to a black-owned business or somebody who happens to be woke or whatever you want to call it.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, and it's the same thing when you get in your car to drive, right?
Yep. Car to drive.
When you go to a restaurant.
Yes.
When you're just trying to get a loan at a bank, and even more important things, getting loans.
Right. Going on vacations in nice Aspen, Colorado.
There you go.
Or the Caribbean islands. Like, you don't know how you're going to be treated there at those resorts. You think you're getting away to have a wonderful time, but who knows if they even like black people being there, So it just impacts everything.
Have you ever had that experience, gone to a typical white vacation spot and have people give you the...
I have not, because I know where they are and I avoid them.
Oh man, that
I don't need the drama. But that's what we have to research. That's what we research when we go on vacations. All right, what is this place? What is the diversity? How are black people treated? What are the reviews of this place? So that's what we have to look at. Other than, is it a safe place to be, in a foreign country, but really also how do these resorts treat black people?
Yeah. Am I going to be stared at 24/7 and treated like crap as I'm spending thousands of dollars, or am I going to be able to have fun?
Exactly. Yeah. It's so such a a weight to bear. It's very Black people really have to be much more conscious of their mental health just because of those things add up
Yes.
so quickly.
Right. It can just weigh you down and make you feel hopeless, I would think.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. I just hope that this somehow changes. I mean, I think it can. I've been to Europe a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to France a lot. Now they have their problems there. They're very anti-North African.
Okay. Sucks. Yes.
But I think from what I've seen, for the most part, other Black people, I hate saying that, but are not treated as badly as they are here. I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And as I research more, I sadly, the colorism, all started in Europe anyway and emanated here in the United States into more aggressive racism. But in French culture, Black people were heavily involved. Yeah. And even more than history tells, like with the French Revolution, there was a Black count. That was a big part of the whole Three Musketeers story, like things like that. Yeah. Were big parts of French culture. And that's why Black people are generally more accepted. I get the North Africa stuff because that goes back centuries to like the Moorish Empire and fighting with them and taking over Europe and all that cultural stuff. But generally in French culture, Black people have done a lot better there than the United States.
And they did have slavery, maybe not in France proper, but in their outlying areas,
Right.
But I think it probably had a big impact on the way they are now, in that they didn't have slavery in France itself. I don't think. I think it was only in their satellite islands.
I believe it was. Yeah. Yes.
Well, gosh. I think we're so far from this, but I the other day I was listening to a scientist and he was explaining how race doesn't even really exist from a scientific standpoint.
It's an illusion.
Yeah. I mean, it really is just a difference in the amount of melatonin.
Yeah, exactly. And the crazy thing is it didn't exist through most of the course of history. There was slavery. There were, civilizations that conquered other civilizations. There was all, the biblical stories, but nothing had to do with skin color until the Roman Catholic Church designed it for slavery, for the kings of Europe. Slave, like it was specifically designed to be a hierarchy of skin colors are going to be built into our economy, and the darker skinned people are going to be the least valued, so they can be taken into slavery and forced to work all over the world. So it didn't really start until the late 1400s, early 1500s.
Like right after the Dark Ages?
Right after the Dark Ages, Portugal started to try to infiltrate West Africa, and they battled a number of West African tribes to finally get a sliver of West Africa. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, okay, what do we do next? Why don't we start slavery? Why don't we enslave people? Yeah. We need to get some business going. So let's force these people to, do work for us. But they had to refer back to the Roman Catholic Church. Like, okay, how do we design this economy? Yeah. So that's all of a sudden skin color was a big part of, how we are today.
Wow.
And everything in Europe started getting whitewashed. All these famous statues used to be multicolored, and now they're all white. They're all painted white. And Rome and France and England, like all of those famous statues used to be different colors. Really? Skin. Yeah.
Oh,
there's
my
really
gosh.
interesting readings about that. Yeah.
The Catholic Church, the root of all evil.
root of root of modern racism or colorism. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
I'm going to have to read about this.
this is the there's some good literature on that.
I didn't even know that. And I studied this stuff.
Oh, really?
Well, I guess they left some of it out.
You left a little bit out. Yeah.
I mean, I know some ancillary things to that, but I didn't really actually realize that they were the number one perpetrator of this whole new racism that we've had for the last few hundred years.
And that's part. So what's ironic is, obviously that's why Americans came to the United States, to get away from that, patriarchy and church-controlled government, right? They wanted that, and that's why the Constitution was created, have separate, balanced entities. So part of that was the church was running things. The church was running everything. And they kind of dictated to the king. I don't know if it was the King Fernandez or one of those original, the original kings, to implement slavery. Like, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to design this for you guys.
Yeah.
And Black people were at the bottom of the rung.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So, when is your next episode? This week?
Yes. So, episode 5 is coming up this Monday evening for Planet Bay Area, and we're gonna talk all things Bay Area theater.
Great.
So I do have at least one Monday a month where we're gonna dig into theater stuff.
Planet Bay Area, Monday at what time again?
Monday night at 7 p.m. Pacific time.
Pacific time on Facebook. I'll put a link in the notes, but it's they can just look up Planet Bay Area on Facebook in the search bar.
Yeah, they can look up Planet Bay Area, and they can also look up California Urban.
Okay, and then just scroll down and you'll see the upcoming show. But, okay. Facebook Live.
Man. Pretty close to 7 p.m. You're going to get that Facebook Live. We'll get launched, Joe, and then you just jump right on in.
I think you can also put an alarm on there just to tell you when it starts.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll be sure to watch, and I'll put the link here in the notes so people can watch it as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I really admire the work you're doing. I think it's extremely essential in the world that we're facing now.
Thank you.
I'm so glad it's happening. I'm so glad that perhaps we can finally, hopefully, start a new world.
Exactly. Yeah. We can. It's like we can realize the world that's actually there.
Yes. Instead of covering up with our human BS.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Gary.
You too, right? Get to catch up with you after all these years.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, cool.
So don't hang up for a sec. I'll end it there. And I know we went kind of long. I really enjoyed talking to you. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. That's great.
Thanks so much.
Let's do it again sometime. Bring up another topic.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be other topics other than pandemic and
racism.
Although it's important right now, it is important. But my wife's like, "Won't you give it a rest?" Because I can't stop talking about either of those things.
Yeah,
you guys are nuts. But
for Black people, we can never stop talking about it. So
I know, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, it must be like, this is, I don't know. Did I stop it? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it must be. I could just imagine what it must be like a constant theme in the house. Like, okay, well, what about that? Yeah, and it just becomes a way of having to think about everything, right?
Right. Growing up in a Black household, that's all you talk about. Yeah. What your father's dealing with, and my dad was dealing with in sales, in retail and high tech. What my mom was dealing with, working with the recreation departments in San Mateo County. What my grandparents dealt with. They They moved out to San Francisco from Houston, escaping a lynch mob. That's a crazy story. Like all of this stuff, you learn as you grow up. You learn more and more and more about what has happened in our family tree.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Cool, man.
Thanks, Gary. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for sticking by until the end. And remember, if you like the show, tell your friends. Even if you don't like it, tell your friends. Go into iTunes and leave me a fair review. Give me some stars, baby. I need some stars. And as I said before, I will read your review on the next episode. That's right. And you can have your 15, 20, 30, maybe even a whole minute of fame. That's right. Because I'm generous that way. Okay, everybody, thanks so much for listening. And until next week, you take care of yourselves. Wash your hands, wear our masks like our president does. Social distance, stay home. Okay. Until next week, I will see you on the boards. Bye-bye, everybody. And please enjoy the beautiful tones of Miss Carly Ozard singing her version of Bridge Over Troubled Water.